Is forgiveness the right choice? If someone has hurt you in the past, should you forgive them? Okay, scenario one is a young lady, let's call her Jane. Jane was hurt very profoundly by her ex-boyfriend. They were together for a few years, and Jane would later find out that her boyfriend had been cheating on her. And even before she found out about the infidelity, she was generally aware that her boyfriend was behaving narcissistically. And now years have passed, and Jane says, this ex-boyfriend of mine, he really did a number on me. Should Jane forgive her ex-boyfriend? And I believe the answer is yes. Why should Jane forgive her toxic, malicious ex-boyfriend? Well, the answer is the opposite of forgiveness is holding on to resentment. Jane should not hold on to resentment. For the sake of her mental health, she should let go of this resentment that she has towards her ex-boyfriend. Forgiveness is giving up on a better past. If Jane is listening to this right now, she might say, "Are you crazy? You want me to call up my ex-boyfriend and tell him I forgive him?" No, that's not what I'm saying. Especially if this ex-boyfriend was extremely toxic and extremely malicious, then Jane should not contact her ex-boyfriend at all in any way. Contacting her ex-boyfriend might cause her to get hurt again. But Jane should close her eyes, picture her ex-boyfriend, and say to him, "I forgive you." Within her own brain and in her own imagination, she should say those words. Holding on to resentment is like taking poison and waiting for your enemy to die. All of us have a duty to let go of our resentment in order to make ourselves happy and in order for us to live a happy, mentally healthy life. Okay. Scenario number two is, a young man, let's call him Steve. Steve says, my parents always belittled me when I was growing up. They never respected me. They always found a way to criticize everything about me. It hurts to be around them. Every time I see them around holidays, I just know they're going to find something else about my life to criticize. So Steve asks, should I go no contact with my parents? Should I cut them out of my life? Well, none of us can answer that question for Steve. That's a hugely personal thing, whether or not you decide to go no contact with your parents and cut your parents out of your life. But what's absolutely true is that Steve should forgive his parents. All Steve can control is his own happiness and his own mental health. And that happiness comes from forgiveness. For Steve, forgiveness is not about being nice to his parents. Forgiveness is about being nice to himself. Okay, a lot of this wisdom that I have learned about forgiveness, I read in the book, You Are a Badass, by Jen Sincero. The chapter that talks about forgiveness is titled Forgive or Fester. And after reading the book, it really is quite obvious that forgiveness is a gift that you give to yourself.